Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the participants and the organizers in this really wonderful conference. I know that we're coming to the end of a long day, which I am feeling myself as well, so thank you for the attention and for your focus for the next few minutes. For me, this is a great opportunity to explore shared cultural connections and to explore new avenues of cooperation between Israeli institutions and Uzbekistan, so I'm glad to present a bit about what we have. I want to do two things in the short time that we have together. The first is to talk a little bit about the National Library of Israel, an institution that I know is not familiar to many of you, give a brief history of the institution, and particularly the Islamic and Middle East collection of which I'm the curator. And then I'm going to show a few examples of the Uzbek cultural heritage, in particular manuscripts that we have in our collections. So to begin, the National Library of Israel, if we can move to the next slide, that would be great. Next. Okay, the National Library of Israel was founded in 1892. Prior to the establishment of the state, as a modest but ambitious center for the preservation of books relating to Jewish thought and culture worldwide. The driving force behind the first incarnation of the library was a doctor from Białystok, Poland, named Josef Kazanovich, who sent nearly 20,000 volumes from Ukraine and from the rest of Europe to Jerusalem over the course of his lifetime. The library continued to develop, and in 1925, if we could have the next slide, please, which Gilad just mentioned, that year saw the founding of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and the library was incorporated into the university and renamed as the Jewish National University Library, and it assumed the functions both of the National Library of the State, pre-state at that point, was the deposit library for every book published within Mandate Palestine, and was also the research library of the university. That function continued for the next decades, and in 1960, next slide please, the library opened, no, this is another picture of the first building on Mount Scopus. Next slide please. Right, so 1960 is actually a photo from 1961. The library moved to a new building on the new campus of the Hebrew University, where it still resides in West Jerusalem. A monumental structure. It was, this period saw an immense amount of growth of the library, the expansion of collections. This building remains the home of the library until today. But over the course of the 80s and the 1990s, and the early 2000s, a lack of funding from the government and competition from other institutions sort of led to the decline of the library, but that all changed in 2007 when the National Library, mandated by the Israeli parliament, became a secular institution, no longer part of the university, with a new mandate to, and I'm quoting here, to collect, preserve, develop, and endow collections of knowledge, heritage, and culture in general, and those of the Jewish people, the state of Israel, and the land of Israel in particular. Can we have the next slide? So this is a picture of the library as it is today, basically, one of our reading rooms. And as part of this transformation and renewal of the institution, we've really tried to move into the 21st century, both in terms of opening access. We have huge projects of digitization. I'll talk about one of them in a few minutes. But also serving new and diverse audiences. Not only the scholarly community in Jerusalem, but scholars throughout the region and throughout the world who can access our collections in multiple ways, physically as well as digitally. And we're just about actually to begin a new chapter. So it's fortunate to the relationship between the library and this conference in Uzbekistan, because now in March of this year we're moving to a new campus. If we could have the next slide, please. Which is located between the Israel Museum and the Israeli Parliament. A really state-of-the-art structure which will serve we hope will serve the public in Israel and around the region. So one of the most important parts of the renewal of the library concerned the collections. These were reorganized rather than being simply a broad humanities library to focus on 4 areas. So there are 4 main collections in the library today, the first being the Judaica collection, then an Israel collection concerned with the state of Israel and its modern history, a general humanities collection concerned primarily with culture in Western Europe and Greek and Latin classics, and also the Islamic and Middle Eastern collection. So I'm going to say a few words about 2 of those collections that are most relevant to our purposes here. The Chaim and Hannah Solomon Judaica collection is the largest collection of written and printed Judaica ever amassed, including the vast majority of Hebrew and Jewish books, journals, and magazines. It includes thousands of Hebrew letter manuscripts, both those in Hebrew and in Judeo-Persian, Judeo-Arabic, and other Jewish languages and dialects, as well as digital and microfilm copies of 80,000 other manuscripts from institutions scattered around the world. As for the Islamic and Middle East collection, I'll be saying a bit more about that because I'm very proud of it. It deserves most of our attention today. It's a leading research collection of its kind in Israel on Islam and Muslim cultures. It enjoys an international reputation, particularly in the areas of classical Islam and Arabic literature, and draws visiting scholars from around the world in those fields. In addition to manuscripts of books, the collection also holds a very important and unique collection of Ottoman and Mandate era Arabic newspapers, all of which are scanned and now available online. And this newspaper collection is widely used for research and scholarly purposes. If we can have the next slide. Oh, that's not the right one. Maybe click it again. As the reason that it was so important to the leadership of the Hebrew University to bring this collection was that they wanted to establish a research center for Arabic language, Arabic literature, and Islam. And with the growth of the department at the university, our Islam and Middle East collection continued to grow. Can we have the next slide, please? 2 of the early directors of the library, Dr. Weil and David Annette, both of whom were of German origin, were really a German library in Hebrew garb. So they were both scholars of Islam and continued to invest in and expand the Islamic Middle East collection. The most important, both for us and in general, development in the history of the collection is the donation of the Avraham Shalom Yehuda collection of manuscripts and archive. You can move to the next slide, please. Yehuda, born in Jerusalem in 1877, was a polymath scholar and Islamic manuscript collector and dealer. He studied in Germany, was a student of Goldziher. You can see a letter from Goldziher to Yehuda here. Moved around Europe, the Middle East, and the United States over the course of his life, and is perhaps best known for his role as one of the leading manuscript dealers of the early 20th century. Yehuda bought precious manuscripts, which he identified and could identify because of his scholarly training, sold them to Princeton University, the University of Michigan, the National Library of Medicine in the United States, the British Library, the University of Heidelberg, and other institutions. Over the course of his life, Yehuda handled thousands of manuscripts, and towards the end of his life, when he was living in New York, he decided to donate the remainder of his collection, numbering some 1,200 manuscripts, to the National Library of Israel. This collection stretches from the 9th to the 19th century, includes all the major fields of Islamic studies and Arabic scholarship, as well as Persian poetry, classical Persian poetry, ministers, and we'll see an example in just another minute. In general, in terms of its holding, the Islam and Middle East collection has 500,000 books, including rare and early prints in Arabic, Persian, Turkish, and European languages, a wide selection of periodicals, scholarly and popular, a rich collection of archives, photographs, sound and ethnographic recordings, and more. And all told, we have 2,500 manuscripts of Arabic, Persian, and Turkish, a wealth of knowledge and beauty that I'll say in a few moments I'm happy to be able to share with all of you. So the most important Uzbek cultural treasures that we have in our institution are part of that manuscript collection. Can we move to the next slide? Right. So the first one I want to mention is a Khamsa of Navai, donated by Avraham Shalom Yehuda. It's part of the Yehuda collection, as you can see from the shelf mark here. It's an illuminated manuscript with miniatures copied in 1829 to 1830 in Balkh. So not within the territory of Uzbekistan, but certainly part of the larger Uzbek culture. We can move to the next slide. We don't know exactly where Yehuda himself purchased this manuscript. It could be from other European dealers. It could be also from the territory of the Ottoman Empire. I'm happy to say that Yehuda's archives came with a collection from the National Library, and this year, which sees the 100th anniversary of his death, 100th anniversary of the collection, I'm sorry. We're opening the archive to research. We're going to be scanning the entirety of it, and hopefully we'll learn more about the provenance of these items as we do so. If we can move to the next slide. This is another beautiful image of the manuscript. You can see the colored paper, and this is the beginning of the 5th section inside Islamic. So, alongside Yehuda, there are other manuscripts in our collection. Before we move to the next slide. So, over the course of its century of history, the library has purchased and donated a number of other manuscripts in Persian, Arabic, Turkish. This is one of them. For those of you who were at the Ulugh Bey Observatory yesterday, he needs no introduction in this forum, but I was very moved to actually be there, having known this manuscript is in our collection. It's a copy of the Zishr Beg from 1676, copied here in Samarkand. And it actually has an interesting history. Aside from being a very fine copy itself, this copy was in the possession of a man by the name of Samuel Davis, born in 1760 and died in 1819, who was one of the directors of the British East India Company. Sometime, it seems, during a decade that he spent living in the city of Bahawalpur on the Ganges River in India, Davis acquired this copy of the Zij, which fit with his interest as an Orientalist, especially in Islamic and Indian mathematics and astronomy. Davis and William Jones, the much known Orientalists, were the founders of the Asiatic Society of India. And the manuscript actually passed to Davis's son, John Francis Davis, who later served as the governor of Hong Kong, and signed his name and the word Bahawalpur in our copy. So if we could move to the next slide, you can already see the next one, please. This is a representative page. And here you see the signature and the word Bahawalpur, and a stamp of an earlier owner of the manuscript. This manuscript was donated to the National Library by an Iranian-born Jewish collector named Yochanan Ben-David. I don't know if that name is familiar to any of you. He lived in London for most of his life, donated more than 200 Persian manuscripts to the library, as well as his personal archive. He was, in addition to being a collector, was also an artist, and spent his career cutting up Persian manuscripts, removing miniatures, and then adding his own paintings in the leftover frames. It's a very interesting collection. And in addition to our Islamic manuscripts, we also have a number of treasures related to the Jewish community of Uzbekistan. If we can move to the next slide. As part of our Judaica collection, we have a collection of thousands of Jewish marriage documents, known as ketubot. And this is a ketubah, a Jewish wedding contract made in Bukhara, in Uzbekistan, in the year 1791. Ketubot, wedding contracts all follow a similar formula. Yeah, okay, we're approaching the end of the time. are written in Aramaic. So if we can move to just the next slide, and I'll finish up. So I've highlighted in red here actually the word Wapara written in Hebrew characters in the Judeo-Persian script. And we at the library are very happy to connect Jewish and Muslim culture and legacy in Uzbekistan, and to participate in the upcoming project highlighting our collections and those of partner institutions in Israel. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention.